Welcome to the Redbird Report, your destination for the latest on the St. Louis Cardinals. Here are your hosts, BK and T-Bone.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's time for some Walker talk. You getting sick of this yet, T-Bone?
Oh, am I ever? Because he's only been talked about for the whole baseball season.
So Jordan Walker is once again back in the news. If you've missed it, first of all, you may be living under a rock. And if you're listening to the show and you missed this news, I would love to know how that Venn diagram works. But regardless, Jordan Walker is back in the news because earlier this week, Brant Brown, the Cardinals hitting coach, was on KMOX. Ollie Marmol does a weekly interview with KMOX on the Gas House Gang. This week, he invited his hitting coach on the show with him. And first of all, I thought it was a really intriguing conversation. Brant Brown was open, he was honest, he was candid, and that led to some interesting comments about Jordan Walker, who he basically said he needs to prepare better. He needs to figure out how to make himself uncomfortable to make him a better hitter. And he also went into some of the things that they're trying to do, whether that's moving back in the box or some of the things with his swing path that they're trying to do in order to make Walker the player that they think he should be, you know? And he said there hasn't necessarily been the buy-in in the past that Jordan Walker needs to have. And then this quote comes from Ollie Marmol as he was having his pregame availability with the media. Quote, "I need to see Jordan have a sense of urgency for the things that need to take place in order for him to get consistent results." He then continued, "That goes with his move toward the ball, his preparation in the cage, but also his approach in a game. You have to start seeing some progress. I think it's important as you're evaluating over the next month, you need to start seeing progress and consistency." Another quote from Ollie. "If you're making the right move, your swing breaks down when it's not in the zone. He has to be more consistent with both of those things in order to have success. Real adjustments have to be made both physically and approach-wise for him to have success." Then there's this quote. This comes from Jordan Walker, who was asked about those comments from Brant Brown prior to the game. Quote, "I don't think it's ever comfortable changing what you're used to, and that's kind of how it is right now. I do want to see results, obviously. Getting back to where I was right after the All-Star break, I think I really liked my approach there. What I'm thinking about is I'm just in the bad part of a stretch with my new adjustments at the plate. Soon, I'll get back to hitting the ball and driving it hard up the middle." Okay. So that is a lot of words to say this. We are once again at the same place that we've been with Jordan Walker basically since the moment that the 2024 season began. Because 2023, while weird, he comes up, everybody's excited, he's the rookie prospect that everybody can't wait to see, and then he goes back down and then comes back up, but then he has success, right? So like whatever, it all worked out in 23, despite the team being trash for the most part. 24, it was a disaster for Jordan Walker from the moment that the season began, and 25 has basically just been a continuation of that. T-Bone, what'd you make of all of this? I've got my thoughts personally, but I just laid that all out for you. What are your thoughts on Brant Brown, more or less, calling out the player publicly, putting him on notice publicly, Ollie Marmol having some comments that back up what Brant Brown said, and then Jordan Walker more or less acknowledging what Brant Brown had to say?
Yeah, I thought it was the Cardinals kind of trying to get to the last straw and say, hey, this is our last-ditch effort to try and get something through to Jordan Walker, because you don't make these comments without having these conversations in the past with the player. So I think this was, hey, man, we've done everything behind the scenes. And if you think about it, the Cardinals organization has been the one to kind of wear the arrows in the back at this point of protecting Jordan Walker of, oh, the Cardinals broke his swing. It was about launch angle. Oh, it's Ollie Marmol's fault. And now Ollie Marmol and Brant Brown just stepped to the side and said, hey, we're doing what we think is going to work. Talk to the player because the player's not doing what he should be doing behind the scenes. And that's a very damning comment towards Jordan Walker. And if you're him, this is the Cardinals organization basically pushing it towards the end of the road here. Now, maybe that's not at the end of the season in the final month, but it is, hey, this is our last effort to try and make this work with this player. If this doesn't get through to him because we're putting public pressure on him now, then I don't think there's going to be a scenario where this works for Jordan Walker here in St. Louis. And that's where it gets difficult to find out like what that timeline is. Is this something that is going to require, can you get answers on in the final month of the season? Do you need the final month plus the offseason of working with Brant Brown? And then how do you plan of using him going into 2026? But I was a little surprised that the Cardinals went with this last-ditch effort, but it makes sense because you look at Jordan Walker. He mentioned the All-Star break. He looked pretty good coming out of the All-Star break. Since then, he's been terrible. Since August 1st, he's got an OPS of 495.
So since the start of last season, there are 301 players in Major League Baseball that have taken at least 500 plate appearances. Jordan Walker ranks 294th among them in OPS. He's bottom 7 in Major League Baseball in OPS over the past 2 seasons. The guy that's tied with him is Michael A. Taylor. I'll read you some of the other players that are in this range if you'd like.
Who's worse than him?
Victor Scott, the second, is below him. Christian Vasquez is below him. Nick Allen is below him. Brian Hayes is right around that same range. Patrick Bailey. There's a lot of catchers. A lot of catchers and a lot of defense for shortstops or center fielders.
Yep.
Is basically the area that Jordan Walker finds himself in. If you go by like wins above replacement, it's even worse. I mean, he is one of the worst players in Major League Baseball over the past 2 seasons. In fact, he is literally ranked dead last in wins above replacement at -2 since the start of last season. I just, if you're Jordan Walker, this is what I'm struggling with, T-Bone, because I can't imagine this stuff is said publicly unless it has been reiterated and reiterated and reiterated to Jordan Walker, and it's not clicking. For whatever reason, it's not clicking. And if that's where you're at as a coaching staff, I can see how you would get yourself to a place where you're like, what can we do? How do we get it across to this guy that what you're doing is not working and you have to adapt in this game or you die? Like that's Major League Baseball. If you do not adjust to the adjustments that the league has made against you, you're done. And it happens so freaking quickly at this level, dude. So for Jordan Walker, he had a great first season. And I think he had success all the way through the minor league system, never really failed. My assumption, this is purely an assumption, Jordan Walker has probably never failed at anything in his life. He's a super bright kid. My guess is, purely a guess, school probably came relatively easy to him. And on the baseball side of things, he's always been this uber athlete. So he can get away with things. Like even if his techniques were not always the best, the athleticism, the talent is such that he's just always better than his peers. And that was the same way that it was for him throughout the minor league system. And then it was the same way even when he got to the big league level, where he failed for a brief stretch of time and then he took off. And over the last 2 years, that hasn't been the case. So my guess is he's probably thinking about like, my swing got me here. My approach got me here. I've always had success with it. Why wouldn't I just stick with this? And the Cardinals are looking at this and saying, dude, for 2 seasons, you've been horrible. The worst player in Major League Baseball by some metrics. And by almost all hitting metrics, a bottom 10 hitter in the sport over the last 2 years. You have to adjust or it's over for you here. And so I think eventually you get yourself to a place where you say, we've got to put some public pressure on this guy because clearly us doing this privately isn't doing it. And if it is true, I have to take them at their word. If it is true that he's not preparing the way that he needs to, and then he's like hesitant at best, reluctant at worst to implement some of these changes into the game, well then, yeah, I understand how you do this. It sucks. I wouldn't like being called out publicly if I'm Jordan Walker, right? Like if my boss went to the media today and said, yeah, BK, we think he does a pretty good job on air. We think he's got a bright future, but he's got to do X, Y, and Z better. And until he does, like he's kind of on the spot right now. I wouldn't love that unless it had been communicated to me 10, 15, 20 times behind the scenes and I wasn't acknowledging it. I was like, they're never going to do anything about it. I've got ultimate security here, right? If that happens and then they call me out publicly in the media, like, yeah, it's on me to make those changes. So I think that's the way that Walker needs to approach this. I understand anybody that's pushing back against the coaching staff for saying these things, but I just refuse to believe that they are doing this publicly unless it has been reiterated to him time and time and time again that these changes have to happen. And now it's time. You've got 1 month left this season. I don't think they will or should trade him this offseason. That's my personal stance on the matter. And if you think that you're going to have him back again in 2026, all right, let's start this now. Put this public pressure on him, because once you get to the end of the season, that's no longer available to you. And you don't want to do this in season at the beginning of next year. It doesn't make sense to do that. The timing had to be now or never for this public pressure campaign, basically, right? So you do it now. You get into the offseason. Hopefully he takes this to heart. He works with the coaching staff all offseason, because that's when you can really make significant changes to your body, to your swing, to all of the approach, whatever, because you don't get the negative reinforcements the same way that you would during the regular season. Come back next year. Hopefully it takes form. But that's my long-winded thoughts on Jordan Walker, where we're at, and why I think this might have actually been necessary for the coaching staff to do.
Yeah, I agree it was necessary. Where I have a tough time trying to figure out is where the timeline is for Jordan Walker in terms of how long are you willing to do this with him? Because, again, to me, there is no coming back from this. And I think there are some players, I mean, you mentioned it, the theory of, okay, well, maybe he's never failed before, and this kind of the, hey, my swing will get me here. Some players need that, hey, this isn't good enough, and we are giving up on you. They need that. You need that in your life at times. And maybe that is the case for the Cardinals of, hey, we go this final month, we're still not seeing it, it's not going to work. We don't think we can fix this in the offseason, because the one thing that I would worry about in the offseason is, sure, you can have more time to work on things. You can try and get things fixed. And then you get back into spring training and all of a sudden it doesn't work again. So what do? You revert back to your old self. So in other words, you just wasted 3 months. You've done all this work, 4 months on a public pressure campaign. And now you're right back to starting point A. And you've already gotten 2 seasons if you're Jordan Walker to figure it out. But what makes it tough for me on the timeline of what you do with him is, you're right, there is no trade value for him. If you trade him, you're just getting a lottery ticket prospect. And he's the kind of prospect that when you look at the tools, you look at even his baseball savant page, for a guy that has got a 495 OPS over his last over the last month, and you look at his season overall, there's still some red on his baseball savant page because he is so talented and hits the ball so dang hard. That's the kind of guy, though, that I don't think I just want to trade for a lottery ticket prospect. So I think what they have to do is, I think you're right, it was the right time to do this public pressure campaign. You see if this kind of motivates him for this month. You hope that it motivates him for the offseason. And then you go into 2026, and I think you have to put him on what I would call the Nolan Gorman or Alec Burleson plan, which is, hey, you are not written in pen in this lineup. We are going to go with Alec Burleson, say Ivan Herrera, Victor Scott as our outfield for 2026. Jordan Walker is not going to be guaranteed starting every day in our lineup. You've got to earn that back. You have got to work behind the scenes like Nolan Gorman did. We'll get you some playing time when somebody needs a day off, maybe a couple days at the DH spot. You have got to earn this opportunity back. And to Gorman's credit, he did it. To Alec Burleson's credit, he ended up being the guy that kind of got pushed to the side twice over the last 2 years and ended up winning back a starting job. That's, I think, the way the Cardinals are going to have to approach Walker in 2026.
I would assume Jordan Walker will be in the lineup for most of these games over the weekend against the San Francisco Giants. Are the Giants the cautionary tale for what the Cardinals could do to expedite this rebuild? We'll get into that coming up on the other side here on the Redbird Report. So we have 2 teams this weekend in St. Louis that are, mirror images of one another in so many different ways. The Giants and the Cardinals were the 2 best teams in the National League, really, in the early 2010s. You look at the success that both franchises had, and they were both, predominantly at least, the face of the franchises were catchers. And you look at the way that they had constructed their pitching staffs. That's where a lot of their success came from. These teams were the model franchises for, really close to a decade. And now you see where they're at. It's like, whoa, okay, so no star power on either side, both very middling. They've had their struggles since Buster Posey left behind the plate in San Francisco, Yadier Molina behind the plate here in St. Louis. They're mirror images of one another. And they're approaching things very differently right now. The Cardinals are kind of doing what the Giants had done under Farhan Zaidi, where they're like, okay, we're going to take a step back, and then we'll hopefully push forward. The Giants now, though, at this point, have moved on from that method, and now they're trying to push again. They went out and they signed Willy Adames in free agency. They went out earlier this season, and traded for Rafael Devers. They had signed Matt Chapman to a cheap 1-year prove-it deal, and then re-signed him, extended him to a longer-term extension. Those 3 players, Adames, Devers, and Chapman, are going to account for more than $85 million against the books through 2030 or beyond. It's a lot of money, and I'm not sure they have a guaranteed superstar on their roster right now. So, T-Bone, as we were starting to look at this series and these two teams, how they're constructed, what the path forward is for each of them respectively, it does beg the question, because we've talked about it. We talked about it, I think, last week on the show. Could you spend to expedite the rebuild here in St. Louis? The Giants have done that. Is this a cautionary tale of the pitfalls of going about that method?
Yeah, I find the Giants so fascinating because I think they are a cautionary tale. And I say this on September 4th as we're recording, and they've won 10 of 11 and are suddenly creeping back into the playoff race. I don't think they're going to make it, which is why I think they are potentially the cautionary tale. And the reason I view them as the cautionary tale for the Cardinals is, a lot of people would put this on Mo, which is, hey, he always signed that mid-tier free agent, right? They'd always go kind of the top of the mid-tier, like Wilson Contreras, Steven Matz on the pitching market, Mike Leake, Dexter Fowler. They would always settle on that. Though, yes, those were Mo decisions, I also think those were ownership decisions. And the reason I look at the Giants and say, boy, they feel like a cautionary tale is because when we talk about spending to get out of a rebuild, I think you can do it. But I think it requires signing or trading for Rafael Devers and his full contract, or going out there and signing Kyle Tucker to his mega deal that he's going to get this offseason. Not what I would expect the Cardinals to do, because you look at those guys that we were talking about. Willie Adames, 7 years, $182 million. That's definitely a deal the Cardinals would do. Matt Chapman's extension was 6 years, $151. They would totally do that. Jung-Ho Lee, who was a center field, defense, contact lefty hitter, 6 years, $113 million. So you just locked up 3 guys for 6+ years that are good players, but not great players. And they are a lot like what the Cardinals have already. That's basically the Cardinals version of Contreras, Donovan, Burleson, Herrera, but all on 6-year deals and really locking in that core.
And Lee is kind of like Newt-Bar-ish.
Yeah. So I look at these guys and I go, man, my fear is if the Cardinals did do the quote-unquote spending for this to get out of the rebuild, it wouldn't be the actual spending that you should do, which is go out and sign the superstar. It would be, hey, what if we went out there and got the top mid-tier free agent available like the Giants did? And the answer is, no, that doesn't work, because you have to have a superstar. And I think the Giants could be the cautionary tale, because I do think Devers is a superstar. And it's taken him some time to adjust to San Fran, and he's gotten hot of late. I think it's also a reminder of, man, it doesn't just take one superstar bat in your lineup. You need 2 or 3 of those guys, along with those complementary pieces that we were just talking about. Otherwise, you just get kind of stuck in the middle, like the Cardinals and like the San Francisco Giants have been over the last couple of years.
Okay, so this brings me to something that I did last night, because I wanted to come on here and tell you, yeah, but look at X, Y, and Z players. My hope was I could find the player that I could pinpoint, or players, plural, that I could pinpoint to suggest this is how you go forward. And then I looked at the free agency classes over the next 2 to 3 years, and I was like, who are the players? Where are they getting these guys? Because beyond Kyle Tucker, I can read you some of these names, T-Bone. The top of the market is horrendous over the next few seasons. There are no superstars available. And if you don't consider Kyle Tucker to be a superstar, there's literally 0 superstars in the next 2 free agent classes. So I'll read you some of the top names that are expected to be available over the next 2 years. JT Realmuto. Once upon a time, when he signed with the Phillies the first time, maybe you would put him into that criteria. Old. Not now. Pete Alonso. He's got an opt-out. He's not even technically a free agent. Luis Ariz.
No.
Alex Bregman, who's probably just going to opt out and stick with his team.
Yeah.
Bo Bichette doesn't fit what the Cardinals need. Cody Bellinger, Luis Robert, Cedric Mullins, Marcell Ozuna, Jock Peterson, even on the pitching side of things. It's Cease, Gallen, and Valdez. Okay. Cease has had a terrible season. Gallen's had a terrible season. Valdez just, I think, almost allegedly intentionally tried to hurt his catcher. Michael King, who has a mutual option. Jack Flaherty, who I don't think is going to actually end up opting out. Jordan Montgomery, who's been terrible this year. This is it. That's it. That's all of the free agents for this offseason. Next year, somehow worse. Okay. Jonah Heim, who is down there with Jordan Walker in some of these categories. Again, Pete Alonso, Rhys Hoskins, Ozzie Albies, who has a club option, who also isn't going through a very good season this year. Alec Boehm, J.P. Crawford, Ha-Sung Kim, Cody Bellinger, Adolis Garcia, Randy Arozarena, Jorge Soler. There is Tarek Skubal. No chance he actually hits free agency, and even if he did, no chance this Cardinals team signs him.
He
but
feels like a Dodger.
He's available. Freddie Peralta, that's at least interesting. Michael King, Shane Bieber. Like, this is it again. And then I'll go to the next one. Adley Rutschman, Freddie Freeman at 100 years old is available. Maybe that's the thing that the Cardinals decide to do.
That would be a Cardinals move.
Jeff McNeil, Nolan Arenado. Woo! Yeah, let's get him. Future Hall of Famer. Geraldo Perdomo, Anthony Santander, Stephen Kwan. It's not good, dude. The players that I thought, okay, this is how they can go do this. They can go make it work by signing somebody in free agency. I don't know who that player is if you're not signing Kyle Tucker this offseason, which brings me back to the point of, hey, maybe the Cardinals should sign Kyle Tucker this offseason. I know it's laughable to even think about the notion that they would do that, but think about how many things that player fixes for you. It's not a cure-all. You mentioned this with the Giants. They trade for Rafael Devers. It has not been a perfect fit since then. And for most of the season, he has not produced the way that you would expect Rafael Devers to produce. It was not a cure-all for them. It would not be a cure-all for you. However, it puts you on the right track. And it does two things. One, messaging-wise, it shows your fans, we hear you, we're listening to you, we're trying. We want you to know this is a sign with actions, not just words. We are going to invest in this team. And it's not us just trying to convince you of that. It's real. We are absolutely trying to invest in this team, but we're not going to do it in a stupid way. We're not going to spend money just to spend money anymore. Miles Michaelis making $18 million didn't make sense then. It doesn't make sense for us now. But when we have opportunities to go out and get a guy that we see as close to a sure thing as we can, we're going to go acquire that player when the opportunity exists. So to me, I don't expect them to do this. But the case to be made for Kyle Tucker, for the Cardinals to sign him this offseason, is actually quite easy to make. And as you look further into the next few years of what is available in free agency, it becomes even easier because he is far and away the best free agent that is likely to hit free agency over the next 3 seasons, especially when you take into account what the Cardinals currently lack, which is an outfielder that hits the way that Kyle Tucker does.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said there because he is a superstar player. And though he had a weird stretch this year, turns out it was like a broken finger. And yeah, it's a little hard to hit with one of those. But I think what it makes sense for us, he's going to be 29. So when you sign him to this mega deal that he's going to get, you're going to get basically 4 to 5 years, I would say, of his prime. You look at that and you go, okay, well, even if you do sign Kyle Tucker and you're like, hey, our pitching's not there yet, right? We need like 2 to 3 years to kind of revamp the pitching staff. Okay, but he's still there. He's still in his prime, and he feels like one of those players that even when he does go on that slight decline, it, in theory, should kind of age gradually, kind of like how Paul Goldschmidt's was a little gradual. I think he makes all the sense in the world for them. The problem is his ownership doesn't want to spend, and they'd rather go back into this rebuild, which is a weird thing to say because 2 years ago, I've brought this up, they said you can't rebuild in St. Louis. And now they've quickly pivoted to, you know what, no, we can. I think you're right. I think he would make all the sense in the world. I actually think there's an argument for Bo Bichette in that category because I do think he's a stud. He finished top 15 MVP voting 3 times.
If he played the outfield, I would be making the case for him. Well, I just don't know how you make that case for him here.
Here would be my case for him is now Mason Wynn is a major trade asset for you and can help you kind of accelerate it because I think it's too much of a too much of a staggered roster. Too much stagnation when you're looking at your roster and saying, well, we have Mason Wynn. He's our shortstop. Okay, but Bo Bichette's a better player than Mason Wynn.
Right now, what I would make the case for is that I actually think it's not hard to say Mason Wynn could become what Bo Bichette is. I think that is in his range of outcomes. And if I'm going to pay $25 to $30 million, maybe more for Bo Bichette per year, I would rather pay 2 per year for the next couple for Mason Wynn and then figure this thing out as we go along. I see the case for Bo Bichette. I like Bo Bichette. And if they're willing to spend, like, hey, man, go get Bo Bichette and Kyle Tucker. Do what the Texas Rangers did. Let's see if that works here. They're not going to. And so I think it's a much easier, cleaner fit for Kyle Tucker. Again, all of this is pie in the sky. But if you're going to make the case for one, I think it's a much cleaner fit for Kyle Tucker on this roster than it would be for Bo Bichette.
I agree it's a cleaner fit. And the reason I would say Bo Bichette, because I'm not as convinced that Mason Wynn can get to his level in the next couple of years. Because he's taking a step back offensively this year. Now, part of that is he's playing on one knee. So it's hard for me to know if he was going to be able to take that step. But even early on in the year, I still didn't really see it from Mason Wynn, and he was dealing with a back issue. There's constantly something going on with Mason Wynn in terms of some kind of nagging injury that we hear about that it's not anything of major concern. It is something though, right? And to his credit, he posts, but is that the thing that prevents him from getting to this Bo Bichette level that we're talking about? That he's always got a sore back or his knee is barking at him. That's the thing that I feel like really limited the ceiling for Lars Newpart, Dylan Carlson, guys like that. So I agree Tucker's the easy, clear-cut case. And if you told me like, hey, here's the blank check, but here's the wallet, I would go sign Kyle Tucker. But I would also make, if they said, hey, we don't want to go that big, but we would do Bo Bichette, I would say, okay, deal. I will sign the dotted line with him, and I'll figure out what to do with all my other pieces.
Where else are you spending, and should pitching be on that list? We'll talk about that coming up on the other side here on the Redbird Report. All right, T-Bone, as I look at the Cardinals rotation for 2026, it's a whole bunch of blank spots, basically. I don't know what the plan is with Sonny Gray. I can understand. For me, I would like to keep him here. I know what the numbers say. I don't think he's a bad pitcher, though, and I think he would help you in 2026. And if it's just about money, like you're just clearing the books, that's the only reason that you would trade him. Well, if that means that I'm clearing the books to sign Kyle Tucker for the long term, like, yeah, I can listen to that. But if it's just, hey, we need to save some money for 2026, no, man, like Sonny Gray's going to be here for me. That being said, even beyond that, setting Sonny aside for a second, okay, so Matthew Liberatore, we expect to be in the rotation next year. Michael McGreevy, I expect to be in the rotation next year.
And
that's all that I have that's guaranteed. Maybe Andre Palante could be a part of that. Maybe Kyle Leahy could be a part of that. Maybe Quinn Matthews. I don't know who else. Maybe Liam Doyle eventually could be a part of that. But right now it's hard to see exactly who's going to be in your rotation for 2026. This team probably needs to sign one or probably multiple starters going into this offseason. Now, I don't want to get people excited because I just mentioned, Kyle Tucker. We talked about Bo Bichette, these big names.
You're thinking Valdez?
I think it's more likely that they go the Steven Matz, I don't know, Michael Soroka,
Heaney,
Patrick Corbin, Charlie Morton, Michael Lorenzen, that route than some of the, Zach Gallen, Framber Valdez, Chris Sale, et cetera, type of options this offseason. T-Bone, if they're unwilling to spend, though, that's where I think it gets really interesting because those names that I mentioned, like even Jose Quintana, those guys are going to cost, $5-7 million bucks. If they truly do not want to spend this offseason and ownership says, hiring freeze. We're not spending on salaries this offseason. You either promote from within or you find a way to get cash neutral on these decisions. Well, then you're probably going to have to trade for them. My fear going into this offseason, this is one of my biggest fears right now, of many, is the Cardinals will go into the offseason. Ownership will mandate don't add significant salaries, and that means like anything over $5 million, which is every pitcher that's going to be signed this offseason that's a starter. And you have to trade for those guys. And so now as you go into the decision-making process with, all right, we're trading Lars Nootbaar, we're trading Brendan Donovan, and we're trading, Jimmy Crooks. We're throwing those guys. Those are our trade bait this offseason, just hypothetically speaking. Do you lock yourself into a spot where you have to make the move that the Kansas City Royals / Cincinnati Reds made this past offseason, where the Reds traded Jonathan India straight up, and they got Brady Singer in return? And that was it. Like it was just a 1-for-1 challenge trade. You have pitching, we have hitting. Let's go ahead and make this swap. Let's see who comes out on the other side. The answer has been the Reds. It's been much better for them. But my fear is that the Cardinals lock themselves in to a move and a type of return, a type of package that's very specific, the way that they did at the 2023 deadline. Because of the 2023 deadline, the goal was we need close to major league level pitching. It wasn't about upside. It wasn't about we need guys that can project to be stars down the road. No, we need guys that are ready to pitch now. We need John King. We need Drew Rum. We need Simra Bursay. Maybe this doesn't work as well as it was laid out to be. The guy that has actually worked from that was Swanson.
Yeah.
And he wasn't...
He was a lottery ticket.
Exactly. He was an upside play for the bullpen. Showalter was another guy that was an upside play for the bullpen. It hasn't worked out. Some lottery tickets do, most don't, but at least there's upside that's built into them. My fear this offseason is they're going to make a big move. They're going to trade one of these players that a lot of fans are tied to, and in return, they get a what you have already type of a pitcher. A number 4, number 5, somebody that can throw some innings for you, have a mid-4, low-5 ERA, and you leave the season and say to yourself, I still want to upgrade from that. So you traded a good player, and in return, you got nothing of significance. That's my fear right now, T-Bone. If they don't want to spend on free agent pitching this offseason, it will lock them into the kind of return that they have to get for some of these big assets that they have available in trade.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like, I do have some of that fear because when you trade a Nootbaar, you trade a potential Brendan Donovan, these kind of guys that have control, that are good ball players, you should be taking swings for upside, and especially when you're in a rebuild. And that's the part that I really don't understand of what this plan actually is. My thought process is I wonder if they're saying, hey, we're not spending money in free agency because we're going to have to spend money to ship guys out, which, okay, but like...
It's a sunk cost.
Yeah, and if we're being honest, it's much better to just stabilize that rotation by adding 2 guys for like $10 million. You know, the money you spent on like a Kyle Gibson, for example, and stabilize with 2 of those veterans in your rotation rather than having to force young guys up here, and also to just try and maximize your return in these trades. So maybe there isn't a pitcher that you get offered, but maybe a team's willing to offer you like this second baseman. They think, boy, this guy's got some pretty good pop. Maybe the upside is this could be like a 25 home run guy that we can have in our infield for the next 7 years. And instead you're like, yeah, but we'd rather take like the number 5 starter that you guys have. When you're in a rebuild, you should be shooting for upside. You shouldn't be shooting for stabilizing forces unless it is going to free agency to bring in guys to just help so you don't have to backfill with some of your younger players and rush them. That's what I don't understand about this plan. It feels like they're going into a rebuild. They kind of are acknowledging it through the media, yet they don't know what a rebuild is what it feels like to me. And that's the alarming part.
See, I actually think it's about something different. Because I think in a lot of rebuilds, it makes sense to go get the high floor type of a player. Like there are certain teams that right now you could look at the A's. We just saw the Athletics come to town. You know what they need? A lot of really solid players. They're missing the supplementary pieces. They've got their star. Kurtz is a stud, dude. That home run he hit the other night, my God. Like that kid can play. And it's not just him. They have 3 or 4 bats in their lineup that I look at right now and I'm like, man, you guys can build around this. This is not hard. If you supplemented their 3 or 4 big bats with Brendan Donovan and Victor Scott and guys that are just like plus defense, Mason Wynn would be another player that I would throw into this. Supplementary pieces that are solid major league contributors, that would really help them. They're missing the connective tissue of a team. The Cardinals are lacking the star power. And so for this team, where they're at in their specific rebuilds, they're missing the upside plays. And I don't think they have many of those coming through their minor league system either. In some rebuilds, I think it makes sense, once you have that star level talent, to go for the solid, high floor, major league ready talent. I don't think that's where the Cardinals are at. So it gets back to talent evaluation. What do you have? What are you lacking? And it feels as though that's been an issue for them for, I don't know, close to a decade now.
Yeah, and see, I think you have to try for those upside plays first before you can get to the connective tissue, because the connective tissue is a little, in theory, I should say, a little bit easier to develop than it is the superstar. I mean, it's hard to look across baseball and name, maybe 10 superstar bats? Like, you need that guy first before you get the connective tissue. Otherwise, you just end up where the Cardinals, the Giants are, as we've been talking about. You don't have those complementary pieces, and that's why, to me, you should be shooting for all upside plays this offseason.
I'm in agreement with you. I'm saying for the Cardinals, I totally agree. For a team that is in a rebuild, like the Athletics, we would agree is in a rebuild, right?
Yeah.
The Athletics are in a rebuild as well, and if we're just talking about like Cardinals rebuild, Athletics rebuild, what does it take to get to the next level? It's very different things. The Athletics are missing different things than what the Cardinals are. If you combined the two teams, if they just merged, like you said, hey, Athletics, actually the situation in Vegas is not going to work out. All of your talent is going to the Cardinals now. The Cardinals would be like, honestly, we just need like 4 of your players. Because everybody else is just redundancy. We're good. They're worse than our supplementary pieces. But we love your 4 big bats in your order. So what they need is quite different. They're both in the same spot in their respective life cycles as an organization in a rebuild. But getting to that next place requires different things. The Cardinals are in a spot right now that they're lacking the high-level talent. I think that, and I don't need to get on my high horse once again to talk about how they don't understand what it means to get there, but the Cardinals don't seem to understand. They are great at producing solid players. They're really good at that, even as they have continued to say that our system is broken and we do nothing well in the minor league system. No, you do. you don't produce pitchers, you don't produce talent, like high-level talent, superstars. You're as good as any team in baseball at producing 6-hole hitters, 7-hole hitters, really solid defense first, athletic center fielders, and middle infielders. You're great at producing those things. You just can't seem to produce the superstar. T-Bone, is there anything they can do to avoid 2026 being another lost season?
I don't think so. I was thinking of this last night. I was like, okay, so if you're going to go into a rebuild, in theory, you should kind of like tear it down to the studs, right? Be like a 95 to 100 loss team. I don't even think they can do that. Now, maybe if they do this whole pitching plan that they're talking about, maybe that will be the thing that gets them there. And then, like, I'm thinking, man, who's the runway player for 2026? There's probably not one. Like, maybe Walker, I guess, would fall back into that category. But I'm at the point now where, like, I don't even think Walker would be a guy that, like, even fans would care much about his runway at all. And I don't think Weatherholt falls into that if he's up here, because that's just kind of like a learning season for him. Like, I guess the only way that you can make it to where 2026 doesn't end up being a wasted season, and you want to talk about pressure, JJ Weatherholt becomes the guy that you think, because then you can look at him and go, okay, now we do have our superstar, and this changes the complexion of our build.
I would say the runway season next year is actually more on the pitching side of things. This year it was on the position players. This next year it should be on the pitching side, and it's Liberatore and Palante. Those are your two guys, and maybe Quinn Matthews as well could be thrown into that mix. I don't think he's like on a clock, but his situation would just be it's opportunity for him more than it is you have to succeed or we're going in our fork in the road moment. But for the Cardinals next year, I would say that the runway season is much more on the pitching side of things than the hitting side of things, because they've already had that opportunity on the hitting side.
I guess that's fair. The only reason I guess I didn't consider them is because, like, when I think of the runway for this year, it was, hey, we either find out we got it right and we have like a 30 home run hitter in Nolan Gorman. We have a potential, and I thought this was more of your stabilizing for Walker, which of course hasn't happened, but hey, we do think that there is that next step for Jordan Walker so he can become the star we thought he was. Mason Wynn, Gold Glove caliber shortstop, that's 10-15% about like, okay, man, that is a player that every team wants. Like, there was more upside to those plays. For Palante, like, upside is like, hey, you're a big leaguer. For Liberatore, upside is like, I guess a 3 maybe. And that's where, like, you're right. I agree. It is runway for those guys because they are on the clock. You got to figure out what you're going to do with those two. You want to talk about not getting me excited about runway?
We are less than a month away from the end of the 2025 regular season. We will certainly be continuing to chronicle this over the course of the next several weeks as we lead up to Chaim Bloom being introduced as the next president of baseball operations. For Tanner Hendrickson and Zane, who does a fantastic job on the video side of things, I'm Brandon Kiley. Looking forward to talking with you again next time on the Redbird Report.
Find every episode of the Redbird Report with Brandon Kiley and Tanner Hendrickson on YouTube or at 101ESPN.com.